as it grows out, it's gonna kind of fan those colors out and they get wider and wider as it grows out.
Welcome back to another episode, guys. Today we're on the Worldwide Corals farm. I've been fragging corals for about an hour. I'm gonna go grab Josh, and we're gonna show you today everything you need to know how to frag a chalice coral, aka mycelium. There's two different types, but they're basically the same coral. How you frag them, they're a little bit different, but we're gonna be showing you everything. We're gonna show you aquaculture, wild ones, little tricks, how to glue them, how to rinse them, a little bit of everything. So stay tuned for more information. Let's go find Josh. So we lost Josh, but I can tell he's not too far because there's an energy drink hanging around here, and Josh loves those energy drinks. So if you see him at Reefapalooza, bring him a Red Bull, guy. Sugar-free it's gotta be. He loves those things, man. So here we go. So this is specific tank right here. We've been putting some wild chalices that we've been getting, and we let them sit here for anywhere from 2 to 3 months. So we're gonna be grabbing a few pieces so we can start fragging. So let's see where we can start. There's two things that I look for in fragging a coral. Either super healthy, or the coral's not doing good and we have to do an emergency fragging. So if the coral's looking like okay and it's not looking like it's dying and it's not too healthy, I usually don't frag it. So it's gotta be really beat up or really healthy. So this is specific chalice right here. I had it for about 2 months. I grabbed it at a wholesale. It looks incredible. So I'm gonna go ahead and frag a nice few pieces from it today. So we'll start with this one. So here's a chalice that has got a couple finicky spots. It's not doing too bad. We'll leave that one alone. This chalice, if you guys are watching, I went to Puerto Reef in New York, and if you're watching Puerto Reef, I bought this chalice and I already fragged it a few times. It grows like weeds. It's amazing. It's one of the most beautiful things. It's got green, then yellow, then orange, then red. You guys can see it right there. I don't know the name of it, but I got a piece. I kept a piece on my tank. I fragged 2 more pieces right there. There's a little bit of algae there. And I'm gonna frag it one more time. Why not get a couple more pieces going? So we're fragging the really healthy stuff right now. There's Josh, we found them. So I told everyone that if they see an energy drink, we know you're around. So I told them to bring your Red Bulls to Reefapalooza.
I really wanted to cut this one because I gotta get that off of there.
All right, so what we're gonna do with this specific chalice, I just grabbed it. I wasn't too sure we wanted to frag it because it doesn't look too beat up, but that area was bothering me. But this is specific chalice, if you guys can see from the top, it's got 1 color, 2 color, 3 color, 4 with the green. It's got 5 right there with the maroon. So we're gonna try to frag it, but we're not just gonna chop it in just 4 quarters. We're gonna cut it strategically. So when you cut it, let's say you don't wanna just cut 1 frag from there because it would be just burgundy. So when I'm assuming when we cut here, we're gonna cut part of the burgundy, part of the red, part of the blue. There will be 1 frag right there. So we're gonna explain it to you guys as we go. So what's going on there, Josh?
Well, it looks old. It looks like the damage has been done because you can see it's dark. But I was more concerned about how the tissue is a little bit lifted here and how this edge has the tissue a little lifted. So anytime you see a coral that's got a nice, perfectly healthy rim like this, I always want to make sure that if there's going to be a new exposed edge, it's from the saw, not from damage. So we get that old part off.
All right, so I think it's enough with these 3 chalices and this dodge. We'll start with that. Yeah. So we got 2 pearl bone cutters. Josh loved these ones. Why you love these ones, Josh?
Because they're really pointy. I can get in between the little tiny spots where those, I feel like I'm doing it with an oven mitt.
So these are stronger, for sure.
I can break the tips on these, but I've also broken the handles on those.
Yeah, we broke the handles of this. I like this because of the extra length. If you want to just split something sideways, you want to get under a coral and you need that extra length. So that's why I have both of them. I have a razor blade. Sometimes you need it for scraping algae, cutting a zoantid, a little tissue of the LPS might still hanging. Instead of you ripping it, you just cut it nicely and gently. Epoxy, super glue. Lugos for when we rinse the coral.
And this one here.
Couple drops. Small plugs. Big plugs. Rinsing container. Clean container for the corals after. I have a little rack here ready to glue some corals. All right, what are we starting with, Josh?
Why don't we start with something that's really obvious?
I told him that's the Puerto Reef chalice. I don't know the name of it. We need to find out what it's called. It looks incredible.
When I look at this, I'm not worried about color because it looks like the new edge is always red. So even if I cut all the way around the new edge, It looks like that green is going to develop in the center and the red will always stay
It's
on
kind of like the rim. It's kind of the growth.
Yeah, so this one does, it's not like a grafted type coral where you're trying to save each
Gotcha.
color, right?
So
top it off, that way we don't trash the tile.
So something worth mentioning, this specific chalice I can tell is one of those types that grows a lot of skin under the coral.
Yep, look at that. It attached to the tile.
No, it didn't.
Yeah, it did, look.
Oh, wow. How bad is it?
Oh, I lost that piece.
Wow, it's worth mentioning that to people. So you guys can see the skeleton left behind right here. And you can see the rip on the coral right there. So we caught it right on time.
Yep.
Before we got too extended, so.
You want that to happen in your tank. It's gonna happen on the rocks anyway. But for the purpose here, we're trying to salvage every piece of coral without it encrusting on something.
All right, so on this specific coral, how, like before you cut it, what are you looking for? Are you looking for a few frags? Are you looking to cut enough in half, a few quarters?
Well, kind of in the same fashion that you did here, I figure I'm just gonna go around this outer edge and I'm gonna make pieces that are the size of the frag plug.
So you're gonna cut the edge, and then you're gonna just throw little slits in between.
Exactly, because what's gonna happen, look, I'll show you first. If I do this,
Pay attention at home, guys. This is a trick we've been doing for a long time.
I'll cut it short there. All right, the reason why I do that is because now if I go like this, there's only 2 cuts and there's 1 whole edge that was not touched. Rather than having a square that's 1, ugly, and then 2, 4 cut edges. Now, there's only 3.
Okay, couple things, Josh. So I mentioned earlier, this is one of those chalices. I'm not sure, I don't think it's a mycelium, is it?
I think this is Aspera.
Aspera, okay. The problem that we're having with this is growing very similar to a mycelium with a lot of skin. Literally, the whole bottom has got skin just like the top. Tissue, I should say. So this coral, we don't want to glue it right away. Like kind of like a mycelium, a lamellosa, I let them sit for a day or 2. Or I can try to glue them and half of them will come out of the glue.
Oh yeah, they're definitely gonna come out. So there's a couple different tactics there. You can utilize this edge, which is raw now, it doesn't have tissue on it for your epoxy. Or like you said, you can let it sit for a day or 2 and try to callus over.
Because the way that I feel is, if you glue them on the bottom, that area is gonna die, and you expose it to a chemical, which is the super glue, and it can overstress the coral and create a reaction where the coral can jelly up. Have you seen that happen before?
Yeah, for sure. Mycelium do it a lot.
All right, so you said there's a technique, if you don't have the luxury of waiting or nowhere to put them loose, you try to glue them in a little angle. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna do a little example. We're gonna go ahead and glue those 5. So one thing worth mentioning, when you have epoxy, try to do your best to try to coat it evenly. You don't have to, but the more evenly that you cut it, the better the mix is gonna be. Because a lot of times when you pinch it, you get more green or more white. And when you mix it, then it's sticky to your hands. Make sure your hands are nice and wet. Mix it up until it's no longer green or white, it's just all together white. So we got 5 frags. First thing we're gonna do, we're gonna count 5 plugs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're gonna go ahead and get the super glue. And we're gonna touch it with a tiny, tiny dab. Very small, very tiny, just for contact. So we got glue on all 5. You're gonna cut a little piece, very small. You're gonna make a little bowl right in the middle of the frag plug.
Another thing, the reason why I cut like that around the edge is if you actually look at the bottom of this chalice here, you see how there's lines on the edge? Those are called septa, and they go all the way in toward the middle. So when you cut this band like that, like I did, the little half moon or the little quarter moon slivers that you have left over, when you cut this way, you're going in between the septa of the coral, and it's less damaging because you're really only cutting tissue, not bone. You can see all those lines going in towards the center. So when your saw blade goes in between them, it's less damaging. So this is it's kind of like counterintuitive because we're used to seeing the frag perfectly centered underneath the coral, I roll it over to the edge like this, so there's still glue underneath the epoxy and then the glue is on top. And I try to make sure that this raw edge gets rolled underneath the coral. Because even though on the underside where it's really sticky, or I'm sorry, really slimy from the coral, there's still some of it here attached to the edge.
Now here's another trick that is a little ugly, very similar to it, but instead of making contact, just make contact with the edge, put it like that, and then once it heals, you can re-glue it. It's not the prettiest. Obviously you can see the coral's an angle, but the coral is able to stay in the aquarium, take the flow, and the contact was minimal to the bottom area. So again, ideally the best thing to do, it will be to wait a few days to glue them. This will be the second idea. That's the third one right there. But ideally, anytime you see any LPS that you have to glue over the skin, over the tissue, it's always gonna be a problem, right? So this one you have to explain a lot because of the colors.
This one's gonna be kind of hard to do, and there's no one size fits all answer for this. So the Griffin bandsaw has a guide, and it mounts on the underside of that top wheel. And what it does is it provides a little bit of support for the blade to push against. Part of the problem with running it without this guide is it'll run on the very back flange of this upper wheel, and it wears that plastic off really, really bad. So that's kind of the purpose of that guide being there. But in an instance like this is tall, and that's not gonna fit in underneath there like this if I don't take this guide off. It's a really ugly coral to try to cut because there's so many like different tiers of surface. So our goal is to think about the end result. The end result is having nice, perfectly little healed frags all facing up towards the light when they're mounted on the frag plug.
And with the right colors on a coral like that, correct?
Correct. So I'm actually just gonna make this more manageable right now. So my goal is to break this apart across this bottom edge here, and then I'm gonna remove the bottom section of it because this is actually a concrete. You know, over in Indonesia where these are coming from, they don't have the best of resources, so sometimes it's concrete, sometimes it's epoxy, and sometimes it's just a really gummy material that you don't want. First things first, like I said, I want to make it more manageable in size. And because of the fact that I took the guide off, I can't really apply any pressure this way. I just kind of have to let the saw do its thing.
Something that helps is applying extra water when a coral is kind of thick, so the blade gets really hot with the friction, and that stresses the coral out because they're not used to experiencing high temperatures like that.
And it washes all that mucus away that it's going to produce. You don't see a lot now because he's washing it away, but all that white tissue or all that white material that's starting to flow down the base, that's a stress response. You know, and the coral doesn't really like that, obviously. This is not something that it gets to really endure in the wild. If there's a bad storm and it breaks up a reef, you know, it's a one and done. It's a broke and then it's a bunch of pieces, as opposed to running through a diamond wheel.
With the heat on it.
Right.
And that blade gets pretty hot when it's just...
And you can feel too, like right here where my hand is in between the two blades, you can feel that water gets warm. If that does end up happening, it's time to swap out the water that's inside of this base. If you blow on it like this, it's going to lift the tissue from the skeleton, so we try to kind of go opposite of what the cut is. And then we get it out of this water because that's gross. Even if I get one or two frags from this side that are kind of ugly, we let them sit, we heal them, and then we go back through and we can cut them, we can rejoin them with all of the colors that are already there. And anytime that you're going to make a turn on a saw, it's better for it to sit down on the base. And then obviously you're not going to make a beautiful cut the first time, so we'll go through and we'll just clean it up. You see here, this is a white bone. That means that I didn't cut it too shallow, because otherwise, if it was too shallow, that stomach or the gut would be exposed on the bottom side, and you don't want that. So now when it sits, it's facing vertically, and I didn't touch any of the tissue.
It looks beautiful now. Let's see the final product.
if you ever want to cut something and you know the tolerance is very, very small, go back to it and then go back to it again later on.
Happens with mushrooms as well, right?
Yeah, the more you irritate the coral, the lesser its chances are of survival. Don't forget, you literally just cut it in a bandsaw. I'm gonna remove this entire knob for 2 reasons. One, there's a hole in the side of it, and I want to make sure that that now becomes the leading edge of this piece. When I do cut this way, I'm gonna look to make sure that I get the most colors on the edge of the coral. Not visible this way, but on the edge, because the more colors are on the edge, the higher the chances are, just like this shows right here, green, yellow, purple, that's all on one edge. As it grows out, it's going to kind of fan those colors out and they get wider and wider as it grows outward. We're not looking to get the most color on it, we're looking to get the most color on the edge, because the piece that grows in captivity is going to be like a pinwheel outward, like a, how do you explain that, like a ray of sunshine. There's the center and then it kind of fans outward,
Yeah.
right? And that's kind of what they do on a tile. And this is the thinnest section, so I want to go right through the thin area. And you see where I finish, I'm right there on the edge of the red. Now I'm hopeful that that red continues. This is the way that I was cutting it here. I'm gonna turn it this way because I don't know if you can see in the tissue, but I want my saw blade to go in between these 2 eyes and then end right here on this edge, because you see that red? I don't want to bury it. It's like, think of a landlocked state where there's no water on the edge. I want that red to be on the very edge of this coral, so the red spreads, because otherwise it's going to stop being red there and the green is going to continue.
All right, so the guy's back on.
Yep. Over time, these get used a lot, so these guys use this rubber band to hold this cover on. It rattles and it falls off over time. But now you can see I can push on this blade really good, and it doesn't push against the back of this pulley. And as long as I hit that red will be on both sides of the cut. Where my thumbs are pushing forward, there's no living tissue. So I'm not beating up on the coral with any kind of pressure. This one's easy. This one's already telling me where I need to go, because this vein that drops down here has a color line. And if you look at that right now and you look on the underside, so right here under my finger is the biggest, chunkiest, ugliest piece of concrete.
And it's almost impossible to take off.
Yeah, so my thought is I want to score this all the way through, back it out of the saw, and then see if I can break it. And not very often is this a cut that you got to deal with. You know, we've done this a lot, and to be fair, this is probably one of the harder ones that you'll ever have to do. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but the saw blade is starting to tilt like that. That means I'm applying too much pressure and turning at the same time. So I need to give it a chance for the saw to catch back up before I apply pressure again. And instead of me continuing that way to that little curve, I'm gonna come this way to get out of the concrete, because now I feel like after I get to this edge, I can turn it off, I can rinse it off really good, I can turn it over, and I can break that concrete off without shattering this thing into a million pieces. Can you show that really quick, that part that you just got? Look at this. See how this is dark right there? A lot of times that's a sponge that dies. That will kill that coral. Look at that water in there. Ugh.
How much for you to drink that?
How much for me to drink that? I need to have a few beers first. If you can use bone cutters in a situation where you can just clip a section off, I would do that before breaking out the saw.
And another thing is worth mentioning, every time you frag a chalice or any type of coral, the less amount of cuts that you do, the most likely the coral is going to succeed. So let's say you have a beautiful colony. If you're not in a rush, cut it right in half one time. Wait 5, 6, 7 days, a week later, and then just give it another cut. I haven't seen many corals that you do one cut and they die.
Right.
It's usually mushrooms could do that, but for the most part, I haven't seen a coral that you do one cut and the coral decides to be like, I'm pissed off, I don't like you, and I'm gonna die. But when you do many cuts, I've seen it where you just get super stressed out and the coral start just doing worse.
So if you know that there's something wrong with a piece of coral and you're cutting it to fix it, you shouldn't put that with all your healthy corals. If you've got like a frag tank on the side where you can get that out of the tank, you don't know if it's a bacterial infection. You don't know if it's jelly that's going to end up in your tank. You don't know if it's got some sort of parasite. I think that's important. You know, here we've got the luxury of being able to put corals in a different system. And it's hard when you're a hobbyist and you've only got one tank.
Yeah.
You know?
So Josh, something else worth mentioning, remove as much unwanted as you can. Example
Look,
right there.
that stuff dies. See, this is some sort of bivalve. And it smells. I mean, you can tell that was decaying organics. That right there, that can't be good.
So basically clean as much rock, dead coral as you can, as much.
Yep. Yeah, if you look in any of our frag tanks with the corals that have been with us for generations, you can probably see a frag plug in the middle of it, but there's no old skeleton. We don't keep that stuff around. So this is just it's a loose flap from where I broke it away from that. And obviously, we talked about why I don't want that. But the damage here is done, so the best thing for me to do is to take this section off where it's hard underneath and glue it down, because this flapping around is not doing it any good. And that was just the edge that was it was the leading edge, so that was easy to bump. And when I cut that, I didn't just cut it so that the flap was loose, I cut it so that when we do make frags out of this, it's the size of the frag.
Cool. How do you know where to cut? How far you cut from the dead spot?
When you're separating two pieces of coral and there's a dead spot in the middle, you always kind of have to ride the blade along good tissue. So like, I'll give you a perfect example. If you go to the doctor and you have some sort of like really massive damage and they have to do some sort of amputation, they're not gonna, let's say it's here. They're not gonna cut here and leave nasty tissue. They're gonna cut past it.
Way past it.
And that's the same exact thing that we're doing here. We're cutting into good tissue. So the cut is less damaging than leaving the poor tissue there.
Here's the dead area, and you cut a 1/4 inch below, and then that continues 3 days later.
For sure.
Because you don't know what's going on through the skeleton, through the inside of the coral. So ideally, yes, at least a 1/4 inch or so. But if you can afford to go farther, then go for it, right?
So the reason why corals die a lot of times more than anything is because of secondary infection. Almost always that's the #1 reason. So our goal is to get infection to go away. You know, so there's different things like iodine is really good to help kill the infection.
I did put some here.
Yep. You know, we use Cipro, which is not something that I suggest everybody just go out and use. But there's certain dosages that we use, certain time frames that we put different types of coral in, because not everything can handle it the same way. But it's no different from us. If we have an infection, there's a good chance it could lead to death.
Yes.
So infection is always the #1. So remove the infection, leave nothing but good healthy tissue, regardless of how much meat you leave or how far you cut past the infected area, because it can be different from a coral that's this big versus a coral that's this big.
Yeah, that's
you
true.
know, if it's only this, exactly, it's chance of getting sick, you're definitely higher. But if it's only this big, there's a good chance you're going to try to leave as much there as possible.
Yeah, that's true.
Versus a coral that was the size of that container.
Yeah. Well, I think we fragged plenty. Like I said, we fragged some aquaculture chalices, some wild chalices, some with problems, some that were dying, a little bit of everything. If you guys have any questions, post them on the comments below. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We'll see you guys on the next episode. But in the meantime, Josh, I can't make it that easy. Can we show them some eye candy?
That's the favorite part.
You got plenty of that or no?
Tons of it.
All right, we're gonna show you guys some eye candy. See you guys around.